I know he's here. Want to thank him for hosting this, and glad to have him part of this important discussion. Also want to say that we're very honored to have Senator Whitehouse here from the great state of Rhode Island with us, and also our very own Representative Deborah Ross. We know the effects of climate change are no longer distant or theoretical. They're showing up in front of us with stronger hurricanes, more frequent floods, massive wildfires out west, and now in our mailboxes as insurance bills many families can't simply afford to pay because of the way climate change is affecting their rates. I mean, look at North Carolina, we are ground zero. A hurricane destroyed the mountains of western North Carolina. Think about that, a hurricane destroyed the mountains. Just a few weeks ago, we had Tropical Storm Chantal move through the Triangle. So it's affecting our Piedmont area. And as we speak, most of Highway 12 is still closed from flooding from this past weekend of a tropical storm. So North Carolina is on the front lines of this conversation. And now has the third highest rate of policy cancellations or non-renewals in the country. In some coastal counties, more than 1 in 10 homeowners lost their coverage in 2023. Think about that. Losing your homeowner's insurance because of the rising effects of climate change. And just this year, the Department of Insurance approved an average 15% rate hike statewide, with some communities, coastal communities, facing an increase of more than 30%. These hikes were lower than what the insurers originally requested, but we know what that means. They'll be back for more later, especially in the western part of the state following the devastation of Hurricane Helene. The message is clear. You can't solve the insurance crisis without also addressing the climate crisis. Rising risk means rising costs, and unless we take action to make our communities more resilient and reduce the pollution driving these disasters, North Carolinians will continue to pay that price. Today's conversation brings together leaders from government, academia, industry, and community organizations to talk about both sides of the challenge: the immediate need for fairness and stability in the insurance market, and long-term need and bold action on climate change. I want to thank you again for being part of this roundtable and for your commitment to finding real solutions for North Carolina's families, businesses, and communities. And with that, I'll kick it off to our distinguished guests for a few opening remarks. Representative Ross.
Well, welcome. You're in the 2nd Congressional District. For now. I heard we're redistricting again. But I have represented this community, and I want to do a little place setting for this particular topic, because this community has known about these issues for decades. Some might even say generations. And that's why we're here with Partners for Environmental Justice. It's also why we're here at the Walnut Creek Wetlands Center. So Southeast Raleigh, Rochester Heights, which we'll see in a little while, which I represented 20 years ago when I was in the legislature, really has been at the forefront of exposing flooding issues, insurance issues, property issues, and St. Ambrose Episcopal Church has been a leader there. This Walnut Creek Wetlands Center was the dream of a man named Norman Camp, who served on the Clean Water Management Trust Fund Board. I got him appointed to that, so that he could raise these issues when we talk about flooding, stormwater, storm control. And so this issue is not a new one to this area of Raleigh. It's not a new one to coastal North Carolina. It is a new one to the North Carolina mountains and to many other areas in this country that are feeling the effects of climate change that have been spreading and worsening over time. I am delighted to be here. I serve on the Environment Subcommittee of Science, Space, and Technology. We have had multiple hearings on these issues And as a matter of fact, one of our great witnesses, Dr. Dello's here. She's been before us on multiple times. But now's the time for action. Now is the time for action. People are feeling it in their pocketbooks as well as feeling the climate change. And we're so thrilled to have a leader and really a visionary in this area, Senator Whitehouse, from the great state of Rhode Island, the ocean state. So they really know about how these issues affect coastal communities. And I will turn it over to Senator Whitehouse.
Thank you. Let me, first of all, start by thanking Congresswoman Ross and her team for the really magnificent job they have done of coordinating this trip. Working with many of you, and thank you very much for what NCLCB has done. But Congresswoman, your office and you have been fabulous. So really, I'm very, very grateful. Representative Harrison, good to see other elected officials here. And Pastor Taylor, thank you for being with us. I'm grateful to you. So what is the senator from Rhode Island doing in North Carolina? In Rhode Island, we get rainbursts that flood our rivers to the point where they've blown through our sewage treatment facilities. And we get sea level rise and coastal storms and erosion. We're a little bit more ocean, a little bit less state on account of that in the ocean state. And I think those are familiar topics to you here in North Carolina. Upland river flooding from rainbursts and coastal erosion and storms tearing away at your coastal communities. I've been doing climate stuff for a long time now. I'm married to a marine scientist. I could go on about what is happening in our oceans because of our unrestrained and free to pollute release of carbon emissions. I'll spare you that particular talk, but I've been at this for a long, long time. And I've seen us through the era of climate science, when, by the way, from NASA to Exxon, the scientists got it right. And then we've been through the era of climate politics, where thanks to climate denial fraud and dark money political corruption, politics failed at preventing what science predicted. And so we've gone from climate science to climate politics, and now we're hitting climate reality. We're at the very beginnings of climate reality. And so when I took over the Senate Budget Committee chairmanship, we started to look at what climate reality meant for the economy. And the first place we looked is the obvious place, which is to the insurance industry. Because the fossil fuel industry can lie all it wants about what's going to happen in the future. The insurance industry can't. They've got a fiduciary obligation to do their level best to get the facts right about what's coming at them in the future for their insurance policies. And they've got hundreds of billions of dollars bet on getting it right. So they have huge, huge forces at work getting prediction right. And what are they showing? They're showing that there's property here that is uninsurable. And they're showing that costs have to increase dramatically because of all of this. We are starting to see that in Rhode Island. If you go around Rhode Island and talk to insurance agents, they all know what's going on because they're all having to deal with it from their clients. If you talk to realtors, they've almost all lost a deal when everything came together. The family was ready to close, the property was good to go, the resources of the family were sufficient to pay the mortgage, and then that last piece, getting insurance, either made it too expensive or they couldn't even get the insurance, and the whole deal fell apart. And we're also seeing our local bankers and credit unions, who very often hold mortgages, having to take a whole second look at all of this, and of course they're in that closing with the realtor and with the insurance payment. So there is a very core part of the local business community that in Rhode Island, and I suspect also in North Carolina, already sees this happening. And we haven't as environmental advocates, met them there yet. But I think we can. Climate change is not about polar bears anymore, and it's not about somebody else's green job anymore. It's about virtually every family's budget. And if coffee beans go up, or if peanut butter goes up, that's an expense. But compared to having your homeowner's insurance go up, that's a big expense. And where we see the worst of it is somebody who gets fired by their insurance company because their property is too risky for the insurance company. So then the mortgage company steps in and buys the insurance for them because they get to do that under the contract. And they get to add the cost of the insurance, which is 2 or 3 times as much sometimes, onto the mortgage payment, and now you've got a family in real financial distress about making the new insurance-added mortgage payment. So I contend that this is a huge kitchen table pocketbook issue. I'll tell you that we went to Texas on this very point. In Texas, 92% of Texan voters identified homeowners insurance as a financial concern of theirs. That was more than mortgages, more than groceries, and more than health care. So it's really top of mind. I haven't done polling yet in North Carolina, but I suspect when people do, we'll see the same thing. 63% very concerned. 66% already saw a link between climate change and their homeowners insurance problem. And this is having put no effort into making that link. So we start in this conversation in a really strong position with a public that is ready to understand that what is happening to their family budgets through homeowners insurance is a climate problem, that this is the cost of people not paying attention to this the way they should. And we start with insurers, insurance agents, realtors, and community bankers, the heart and soul of the local business community, all already almost certainly experiencing that themselves. So you don't have to convince them, they're seeing it in their daily work lives. So the last point that I'll make, let me just say before I go to the last point, what I'm here to do is to vet that idea with you. I'm like Paul Revere or Johnny Appleseed or something. It's like, I think this is happening. I've been to Florida where it's so explosive that all you have to do is touch somebody on this subject and you get a speech. The polling we saw in Texas came back with the numbers I just described. So I think this is actually everywhere, and it opens a new era of a climate conversation that will give us the political power to solve the problem before it gets devastatingly worse. So I want to hear from you. I want to hear your feedback about that and whether that rings with what you're hearing in your life, with your neighbors, with your clients, with your people you work with. The last point that I'll make is, where does this go? This is not a blip. This is going in a bad direction, and unless we fix the climate problem, it just keeps getting worse. So in the sheet that we handed out in front of you, you'll see a couple of things. The first blue maps are maps that we did in the Senate Budget Committee, working off of insurance industry data that we got from the industry. The second, the orange maps, come from a group called First Street, which does excellent mapping and is available to all of you on the internet and can go right down to very local specific information. But then the next one is some of the warnings about where this goes. And where this goes is the climate risk makes properties uninsurable. And when a property is uninsurable, it's unmortgageable. And unless you're at Palm Beach swapping mansions among billionaires, when a property's unmortgageable, its value falls. Because that owner needs somebody to be able to get a mortgage to pay the price that they paid for it when they got their mortgage. And that leads to the last step, which is a property values crash. And this isn't coming from anybody green. This is coming from the chief economist of Freddie Mac, the giant mortgage company, who said exactly that. You go from risk to insurance to mortgage to property values collapse to a, what he called coastal property values crash so severe that it triggers a 2008 style full national recession. That's coastal. He wasn't talking about the whole wildfire problem out west, which is a similar trigger for a similar cascade. The head of the Federal Reserve, Chairman Powell, testified about 6 months ago in the Senate Banking Committee that about 10 years from now, whole regions of the country will no longer have mortgages available to them. And The Economist magazine predicted a $25 trillion hit to global real estate markets as the correction for value comes to pass. So not only do we need to take advantage of this as an argument, as a rationale for solving the climate problem, because it ain't about polar bears and green jobs anymore, but we're also trying to head off a real economic calamity that is looming, and this list gives you just some of the good sources you can dig into to try to take a further look. My favorite statistic is in the following page. If you read down to the bottom part, it says, how do people like different policies? Impose a fee on big polluters. That's actually how you solve this. You impose a fee on big polluters, because free to pollute is a terrible way to go about your business. Gee, 10% oppose that. 74% support that. How is that not a winning issue when we've got a 64% positive margin over the opposition? So I urge that we take this fight on with new energy, and using this new information, turn the tables to make sure that people understand that their own personal family fortune, their financial future, depends on us getting it right. So that's what I'm here for. I really appreciate, again, Dan and Deborah, for all the terrific support you've shown, and on to the discussion.
Thank you again for being here, Senator. It's an honor to host you here in North Carolina to talk about such important matters. I call this next round of the conversation the strike a match round. What does that mean? We're going to go around the table, and when you start talking, strike a mental match in your head and be done speaking by the time before that match starts. And that's going to get us around the table quickly and on to the discussion. And we'll start over here with Sean at this end of the table and go around.
Good morning. I'm a business owner. I'm in Durham, in Chapel Hill. My business was in Chapel Hill was recently destroyed by the flooding. We opened 3 weeks ago, but
What's the business?
Google it's a
Restaurant?
I've been out for 26 years.
One of the best. You got a fan down here.
I think with a few of them.
Yeah.
We're imagining examples.
But I'm happy to hear the conversation. It's much more than us reopening, because where we're at, it's going to happen again. The technology is not there, the infrastructure is not there, so we're left in a pretty difficult position. We can't get out of our lease. So it's, what do you do? That's our story, and that's my opinion.
Thanks.
I mean, they're really nice, so they're having a little bit of an office with a 7-5 officer, because that means our actual office and our level office. So personally, you know, the experience is extreme automation-driven water out before like me and then Sean Paul and then we work on our justice issues, we fight for resilience, we hold leaders accountable, and we try and keep the utilities, keep rates low, we fair to citizens in North Carolina. We also preserve wetlands. So this issue is what I appreciate you.
Thank you. There's a whole separate talk we could do on how they're driving up electric utility prices on purpose to transfer money from electric utility customers to big fossil fuel owners. But that's a separate topic.
I'm Dan. I'm a state law here. I work with 15 different states.
Are we going near that?
Volunteer pizza and North Carolina chapter.
No.
But I'm also raising more for 9 months about a week ago. So this is an issue that I carry all my life.
And you got insurance.
Yeah, thanks.
Morning, I'm Carolyn Linden. I'm with the North Carolina Justice Center. We're a statewide anti-poverty advocacy organization. And I work with a team that does housing, consumer, energy issues. And our goal is to have people be able to own a basic affordable place to live. So I personally work on energy affordability concerns, but we've noted that, to your point, insurance is increasing faster than energy costs increases. We also work with on making sure foreclosures, and we have attorneys to help people have fair cases and to mitigate with the bank. And so this is an area that we are aware of coming up and are interested in working on more, and it's directly things that move forward.
Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Javon Taylor, Rector of St. Ambrose Episcopal, right across Walnut Creek in Rochester Heights. The city of Raleigh dug raw sewage for 70 years. It was the same year the city stopped dumping sewage, zoned it as the first intentional black community in Raleigh. We're at Walnut Creek Center, where before building this structure, we had to excavate cars because this was a car graveyard. I just rotated on Raleigh's Stormwater Commission, where I was chair for 4 years. One of the things that often go neglected, climate change exists, and for these low-lying communities, non-climate stressors are real. So here, hurricane season is year-round, because an intense rain event means we have a hurricane-like effect. And North Carolina General Assembly has not aided this effort because our government of North Carolina has made it illegal to put in stormwater considerations that mitigate flooding. And currently we're in a 46 square-mile watershed, and water that is not absorbed in the ground runs right past Walnut Creek in here. So this issue of climate change is important, in addition to non-climate stressors, and also pointing to one of the handouts among renters in North Carolina. The fact that renters are in floodplain is not disclosed. So renters rent thinking things are okay, flooding comes through, they lost everything because they didn't know they needed to insure for flooding. So I'm glad that both of you were here.
Thank you.
Good morning. My name is George Jones. I am the Executive Director for Partners for Environmental Justice. We're happy to be one of the hosts here for this amazing event and this important event. Partners for Environmental Justice has been around, and as Councilwoman Ross said, Dr. Norman Kemp is our founder. He was instrumental in this building being established, but more importantly, he was concerned about our community members. And as Father Taylor mentioned, Rochester Heights is directly on the south side of the Walnut Creek area, a low-lying community. One of the things that we're dealing with right now, we focus on advocacy, education, and restoration work throughout the watershed area as an organization. But what we're worried about and what we're focused on right now is also displacement. Not only is it a cost issue for mortgages, it's a cost issue to stay in the home. It's a cost issue to own a home. And it's a cost issue to protect the home. So PEJ has a responsibility, but also in partnership with community members and city stakeholders, we need to do our job to make sure that these community members that are resilient, that have been here 20, 30, 40 years, have the opportunity to live, work, and play in Southeast Raleigh.
Dan, are you going to cut me a little bit of slack?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So, Pricey, just because I have constituents too. Pricey Harrison, I represent Guilford County in the legislature, and I've been there 21 years of passion for the planet and saving our democracy, and really ditto to Senator Whitehouse and to Representative Ross. But I want to talk about a couple things. One, I have had constituents who were affected by a terrible storm that came between Tropical Storm 9 and Debbie, which I didn't even know was a thing, but they got flooded out, and some people lost their homes in Greensboro with not a named storm. And I also have heard from constituents who have been concerned about their interest rates because of the flood insurance affecting the entire state. So it's not just the coast. But what we're doing in the state is going in the exact wrong direction, eliminating wetlands protections for 2.5 million acres of wetlands in our state, half our wetlands, stormwater control rollbacks. I could go on, the list is long, but more importantly, most recently, we have eliminated our carbon reduction goal that was supposed to, all of you all in this room know this, was supposed to take place 70% of our carbon emissions rolled back in North Carolina by 2050. So that's eliminated. I am really interested to hear what all of you all have to say, but boy, we need to get on the right foot back at the legislature to do what we can to mitigate the effects of climate change, because we're not doing that. So thank you for organizing this.
Thank you.
And yeah, thanks.
Good morning, everybody. Congresswoman Ross, it's always nice to see you. Senator Whitehouse, you got your beautiful North Carolina day. I am Kathy Dello. I am the new Assistant Secretary for Resilience at the Department of Environmental Quality. And 2 months ago, I was the state climatologist. So I'm a climate scientist now over in state government. DEQ is largely a regulatory agency. We don't regulate insurance, but we are the lead agency on resilience here in the state. We know that insurance is one of the tools in our toolbox, and we also know that costs are going up for North Carolinians. So under my portfolio, I have coasts, estuaries, energy, flooding blueprint, and general resiliency. The Department of Energy canceled a $156 million grant from Solar for All, which would have provided more renewable energy for North Carolinians and more clean, affordable, and reliable energy for this state. So I'm interested in the conversation and hearing what we all talk about and thinking about how this can incorporate into our larger resilience goals. Thank you.
Kathy.
So my name is Anthony.
She was at NCC. She's a state climatologist. She tested
and I'm a faculty fellow at the new UNC Institute for Insurance and Risk Management. My lab group works on, we map flooding and other related hazards. We recently generated the first estimate of current and future flood exposure to hurricanes in eastern North Carolina. We're also working on a project looking at how heat waves are amplifying severe convective storms, which are throwing interest to the insurance agencies. And we've also been mapping past flood events. We recently completed a study where we mapped 78 events that occurred between 1996 and 2020 in eastern North Carolina, including unnamed storms. And I just want to put some numbers to a problem in eastern North Carolina. We're seeing that flooding is happening much more often than we realize. So our studies suggest that there are 20,000 structures in eastern North Carolina that have flooded at least 2 times in the last 25 years. Much of that flooding is occurring outside of regulatory floodplains. So about 43% of the flooding is occurring outside of regulatory floodplains, which is much more than what is indicated just by looking at flood insurance claims alone.
If you're believing FEMA maps, don't.
And much of the future flooding that we're mapping is even more so outside regulatory areas. So there's types of flooding that we're not currently regulating, like that is caused by hurricanes, tropical cyclones here in eastern North Carolina. We also intersect these maps with data on buildings and credit scores and individual households. And if you look at repetitive flooding and these events that are occurring, especially in areas of floodplains, the biggest problem that we're seeing for the homeowners is the intercoastal plains. So it's not on the coastline, so it's not necessarily at the rivers, but it's these intercoastal areas where property values are very, very low. And we're seeing that for homeowners that have lower pre-flood property values, they're actually more likely to experience mortgage default on the wake of a flood event as well. And so we can really target individual households and understand their risk of credit default after these flood events. So we have some maps showing that for eastern North Carolina as well, to the extent that that's interesting. So this is a topic that's really important to me personally. It's also a thing that I work on a day-to-day basis, and to the extent that it's useful to put emphasis to that.
If you don't mind, I noticed in the material I have on the Institute for Risk Management and Insurance Innovation, I assume this is taken from your website. It uses the term systemic financial risk. Systemic is a very boring word, but it's the scariest word in the economic lexicon. So if you wouldn't mind just saying a word about what you mean by systemic risk.
In the way that I think about it, it's something that's baked into the problem that we have now. So it's a type of risk that we've already, let's say, baked into the current state of affairs, and it's a problem that is perhaps blind to us, that we need to put numbers to, understand, and try to address going forward.
And it takes down the whole system. when it happens. It doesn't just take down the people who are directly affected. Sorry.
Good morning. My apologies if my mic may be a touch as well. My name is Lars Depp. I am representing the Weatherhill Point community. We were flooded by Tropical Storm Chantal just a few months ago, 3 months ago. In talking to all of my neighbors, if we were to try to summarize in one sentence what the insurance system is looking like today, it would be that the system is expensive, confusing, and devoid of humanity. And the climate crisis isn't theoretical for us. We have seen 42 of our 56 homes destroyed down to studs by a recent tropical storm. Most of those homes were not in the flood zone. It's expensive in that we have seen many folks, homeowners insurance, my own included, double in the past 3 years. We have seen the flood insurance rates triple, double, quadruple in some cases. There have been instances where folks, elderly folks, have missed a payment for administrative issues and missed their 30-day window. Life had happened to them. They were caring for a sick relative. They were caring for their community. And they came back and their flood insurance would now be triple what it was today. One such person became one of those people who falls into the statistic of non-insured at the time of Chantal. She had missed her payment by 2 months. It's confusing and inaccessible because when maps are revised, it looks to people as though they are not needing to continue their insurance. They're not at risk. We saw the majority of our homeowners not insured during Chantal because in 2017, FEMA revised their flood maps. In a time of climate change, a community 1 mile away from an aging dam built in the 1930s was considered to not be at high risk for flood. They were told they didn't need their insurance. Most of them didn't. It's devoid of humanity because even when you do everything right, even when you have the insurance, even when you think you have the right insurance, there's always something. We're seeing people having to sell their homes to bottom-feeding investors for half of what they're worth. We're seeing people who had their insurance not getting the full payments. They're only getting enough to fix their electrical, their plumbing, their HVAC. They're still at the studs and they have $18,000 left in their payout. You can't put a home back together for $18,000 when it's down to studs. And in many cases, they don't have the right insurance, even though they thought they did. They thought they had the flood insurance. But they're sitting there at 86 years old, their contents, everything they own is soaking wet. And they don't have the contents insurance, the insurance company won't lift a finger to help them get it out. 86 years old, sitting there a week after the storm, their homes untouched, mold growing in 90-degree weather. And they have to figure out what they need to do next. We sent volunteers to help them. The community rallied around them. There were people who were there to help, but as we continue to grow, as they get bigger and bigger, there won't be as many volunteers. I know this because I spent the first 4 years of my career as a volunteer manager for the Red Cross, going to disasters, setting up the disaster workforce, and sending people to help. So that's our story. That's what we're looking at when we're looking at the insurance crisis, and we really appreciate everything that you're doing to help. My apologies, my hand is confirming twice.
That was a story. That was worth hearing.
Yeah, it's very important. So thank you for sharing such a personal story. Lisa?
Sure. I'm Lisa Sturgeon, with the North Carolina chapter here, our legislative political director, which means that I'm the person who helps our 40,000 plus members figure out how to elect people who are going to do good things for the environment and pass legislation that helps solve these problems. But one of the best parts of my job is making sure that people like ours have a chance to say what needs to be said and be heard by the people who need to hear those messages. So thank you, Lars, for joining us today.
I'm Ray Ricali, I'm also director of the North Carolina Conservation Network. Son of a lifelong public service officer, director of
Me too.
and have been private all over since 2000. We're a level environmental advocacy organization working on a slew of issues. My own portfolio includes resilience, and we submitted our Russell, comments on the insurance price increase that the Board of Commissioners addressed last year.
Great.
We really struggle with the question of how do you deal with the non-flood drivers of the increase in fire insurance costs, what are the right policies for that? And also, what are the right policies with flood risk, since so many private insurance policies will cover that, and national flood insurance program is still open for that. It's really easier to compromise. But as you all have said, in particular, cutting carbon emissions, greenhouse gas emissions, will address all of that. So we appreciate it.
Thank you.
My name is Jerry Lane. I am a professor of geomatics at North Carolina A&T State University. If you don't know what geomatics is, it's plain and simple. But I'm here representing the North Carolina Society of Surveyors, which one of our biggest responsibilities is educating the professional community and training to help with real-world data collection, very precise data collection, so we can provide regulatory agencies and insurance companies, whoever, and helping to mitigate some of the risks of new home developments, solar developments, et cetera. We work with the North Carolina floodplain map, which is doing a better job of updating the FEMA maps in most states. We also have the first certified floodplain surveyor program in this country, training surveyors on how to map out floodplains and provide accurate data necessary for regulatory. So I'm here mostly today listening to see what the survey community can do to assist others in gathering data, to just keep the word out on what needs to be done. We have surveyors, especially part of our state, where we have this form, which is unheard of, to the East Coast counties, where out there this weekend, my hall break, I went to the beach, right on the beach. There's a lot of races just to help them do their work. So we represent the entire state trying to educate as much as possible and just for help on the meeting front in the long run.
Thanks.
Great.
Hello, my name is Karen Hall. I'm a North Carolina State Director. I'm a Howard. We're a research and communications organization that will be able to make these issues salient. And one of the issues that we are currently really working around are affordability costs, but also, current to resources that we need, like the National Weather Service, like FEMA, which began with the NDO program, National Insurance Program, and also National Flood Insurance Program. And so I'm really excited to be here today, and also as a person who has family on the East Coast, it is really frightening to see how much has changed, even over the course of 20 years, with flood and hurricane and how they need to happen swiftly. So I'm here to learn and connect with that.
Great. Good morning. My name is Matt Cole. I'm the Executive Director of the Carolina Sustainable Energy Association. So we're an association that represents more than 200 businesses, local governments, and universities across the state of North Carolina. We focus on energy affordability and focus on providing technologies that reduce emissions in the electricity generating sector, one of the largest emitting sectors here in the state of North Carolina. I commend Representative Harris for all of your work at the General Assembly to protect the emissions reduction goals that we do still have in place, including 50% zero carbon emissions reductions. But on the 70% goal, which is now removed in the General Assembly, about 2 weeks ago, we saw our utilities here in North Carolina file their plans for the future electricity generation in the state, which is largely based on extending the life of coal facilities and doubling down on investments in natural gas. So if you look at the trajectory for emissions here in the state, they're actually projected to go back up in the electricity generation sector for the next 3 to 4 years. And the utilities projecting that rate will increase on average about 2% every year for the next 10 to 15 years, as they've already gone up more than 15% over the past 2 years. So we're incredibly worried about energy affordability issue is personal to me. I'm a recent homeowner who actually just got dropped by my insurance provider for a storm-related claim. And somebody who also recently installed solar on my roof, I can't turn my solar on without having homeowner's insurance. So it's a huge issue, and something that I need to put a lot of attention on. So thank you for this conversation.
Thanks.
Catherine Skinner with the Nation Conservancy in North Carolina. I'm here on two different levels. One, Northeast North Carolina is as flat as the lower Mississippi. And so when you are looking at flood and inundation from the Outer Banks all the way up to the Winter River border, it's zero sea level. That's ground zero there. So we were looking at how you expand those floodplains and how you manage to expand the floodplains to make sure you minimize the flooding, but there's nothing that will minimize or provide any rain event. We also have offices in Nashville that got nailed by Hurricane Helene, and our outback team out there is constantly living with us as well as managing with it. But as an organization, we are heavily in the flood blueprint, trying to look for solutions and expand those floodplains and get local communities to start evaluating their risks in a much more systemic way, baking in recurring. When I say that, we are looking at natural climate solutions and making Mother Nature be part of the solution. And we, under former Governor Cooper's leadership, North Carolina did a $421 million grant where the money is still there and flowing with both a climate and pollution reduction and the co-benefits of what Mother Nature does. And we're focusing in North Carolina primarily on the restoration of peatlands, where you did an emission reduction immediately failed, and it has had a lot of punch on storing carbon. Plus you get flood mitigation pieces in here too. So we were looking at that throughout the whole coastal plain in North Carolina, and with a real tight eye on Cape Fear River. But the other place, we look at all these river immune systems around the floodplains. We are also working to strategically remove the barriers, the underside culverts, the dikes that are stopping the work flowing the rivers to function the way they need to function. And we've had tremendous success on the Roanoke. We're looking at that on the leading solution to open up those the narrow floodplains in the mountains and remove those low-head dams that are blocking the flow of water that heretofore were not a problem. And so we are looking at it at 3 or 4 different levels, plus working with the setting up and keeping functioning funding the Resilient Coastal Cities Program at DEQ. That is a huge one for these 20 coastal counties that are unaccounted. So we are hitting as hard as we can where we are falling short if we are raising problems in communities and how the communities can understand and see these functions floodplains upstream or downstream. And that's the connections that we are looking to make on a national level. They are really digging down in this insurance problem. And that came up at a meeting I was attending last week. I know less about it, but we've got a national view of that. What we don't have is again to the right policies at every step, and that's another place where we need to start.
Leslie, wrap us up.
Yes!
The book of Matthew, those are last shall be first.
And so I actually have heard and did this conversation every day. I work with consumers who are challenged with housing affordability and impact on the violence of change. And then we're continuing to see national gaps that we're creating among the insurers and then identifying problems that are not insurable, which affects homeownership, while in your home insurance rates are reduced 15 to 20% a year. So that we need to stay in that home after you purchase it. Your mortgage is static, but there's no cost that continues to grow if your property taxes as well as your insurance rate. So how do we come up with a solution when they put in certain, building codes that allow homes to be stronger, to be able to withstand some of these challenges that we're seeing right now due to climate change. So it's a multi-layered approach, and I'm glad to be here, and I'm grateful to be part of the conversation, to see what solutions that we can come up with, because it's really going to be a long-term solution.
And are you seeing this in real life in your professional capacity as a realtor, with it affecting transactions?
Yes, absolutely. I was actually working on a deal a couple of weeks ago that fell through because the home that the consumer was trying to purchase had become insurable because of all these claims that had already been filed against the property that was finally closed during the initial offering acceptance. And so therefore the homeowner could not purchase the property because it was insurable. So we're seeing that as well as if you're out in coastal areas, for example, some insurers are pulling out the limited hail damage from their base policies because it's a greater risk. And we're looking at premiums of $8,000, which is astronomical. And if you're already challenged with your debt income ratio, you're not going to be able to afford that. It's the same with flood insurance, because you're in a floodplain. And now your premiums are double or triple what you normally pay. It becomes a house, not what we're getting purchase. So there's so many examples of that. That's just a training for that talk about. Now you have solar panels, which is another thing that is becoming more and more of an issue with this rate down the road, and not everybody has it. And then we're trying to look at what the value of it is over time, more expensive of them. And then there's so many disclosures that go along with it. And so just hearing that talk about that he can't even turn it on unless he has insurance, and this insurance company has now dropped. And so these are the things that we're learning that over time, and we're just finding out new things all the time. But none of us expected that we would have all these natural disasters in areas that we don't think would ever be a thing. And so it's just the continuing of just having conversations. I mean, it's no one size fits all. And then also credit impact insurability. The credit, the age of the home, new construction versus resale property. So there's many layers to it. And we have a 3 million vacancy in housing. So 3 million units down. So already housing is more expensive than it was years ago because there's less of it.
So if you don't mind, connecting what you said, what Lars said, and what Antonia said, one of the scenarios that we've seen in real life in Florida is that a homeowner gets hit by a storm and has a big claim, and the insurance company is slow to respond and doesn't provide adequate coverage. And so the homeowner makes a choice to walk away. It just isn't worth the hassle. It's easier to go start fresh someplace else and live in a tent in your driveway next to your old moldy house and fight every day with your insurance company. And when that homeowner walks away, that property now goes onto the books of the bank that holds the mortgage. And when it does that, it goes on at a dramatically reduced value. And that's how you get the systemic problem of a region in which you hit the loan-to-value ratios of the local banks because their collateral that they all put in their reports and was like legit collateral when they put it in is now way lower. And then that's where it gets systemic. You can't sell the home. The bank has to rejigger its accounting because it's not, doesn't have the capital base any longer because its collateral has slid away, and the whole local financial community begins to shrink. And that's where things suddenly go from, I think it was Ernest Hemingway was asked how he went broke, and he said gradually, and then all at once. And we're into gradually now, and I think we're gonna see a lot of places where it's all at once. And Florida's pretty much there already. It's a nightmare of an insurance system there.
First question, we have a very limited amount of time, so this is gonna be a multi-pronged solutions we're gonna need to solve this problem. I'll ask, the group, whoever wants to weigh in, where do we begin? What's the first step in this order of operations to start solving these problems? And whoever, you want to chime in, Senator, what?
Talk about this insurance problem as a climate issue.
Yep.
The public is ready to hear it, you don't have to be shy about it, and it's true. So why not say it?
Sean, that's your hand up?
Yeah, I have a question. I mentioned this to our landlord, but also pertain to citizens. Is there any conversation at the federal level about creating some sort of tax deduction for if it's uninsurable? Right? So if a business is in a place where they've had a flood, home the same, I'd be happy to have an emergency fund that's allocated for natural disasters, right? Maybe a tax deduction for that. So it's not insurance, but at least there's some benefit to us planning, right? It's an HSA, essentially, but for emergency. I've been talking a lot about that. I'm much away from our landlord. I thought that was a fair compromise and negotiation around this. We're still in process, but is that part of the discussion? It doesn't solve it, but it's one of those tools that could be helpful, so there's not total loss. Right? It creates a bridge of sorts.
I have not heard anything about that, but it is something I certainly can bring back to my colleagues on the Ways and Means Committee and see what they might have to say about it. It's interesting when you create those kinds of tax deductions because the only people who can get deductions sometimes are people who are paying taxes. And so for people who are lower income, the question is, should it be a deduction? Should it be a credit? How should we structure that? But I have not heard about anything like that on the House side. I don't know. Yeah, so good idea. We can take it back.
We are going to have to redo the National Flood Insurance Program at some point. And so ideas that support that or are adjacent to that are actually useful to us because the National Flood Insurance Program is not sound now, it's not fair now, it understates the risk now, and people get stuck in it in a way that you don't have the chance to move away from high-risk property. Yes?
Two thoughts. On the National Flood Insurance Program, some of our law centers put excellent comments on that program. Two came on how we're going. Two thoughts. One in North Carolina, the insurance industry has actually invested quite aggressively with the 45 program to have stronger roots because a lot of what's driving these higher interest rates, private interest rates, is limited risk, and you use the roof, you use the house.
Yeah.
So the 45 program helps subsidize stronger roots, but it's really just not fair. And I would love to see, first we project higher rent schemes pretty much all the way to the mountains across the P1. I'd love to see that program expanded because I think it's the investment that actually protects a lot more than amount of property value. You help people secure their roof, they're much less likely to lose their rent value. That's one piece. The other piece, Senator, you're talking about systemic risk. We've been pretty worried that a lot of the banks that have these properties that are probably overvalued given their actual economic risks are taking those mortgages and repackaging them in ways that are not transparent. So, for example, if you've got a pension fund that is buying, basically a pension fund is buying interest, part of what they're buying is property interest, they may have no idea what those underlying properties are in there. And so that risk ends up affecting a bunch of people who thought their retirement was going to be safe, but is actually eating part of this gap. And I don't know what the solution is to that, but I'm pretty worried about it, and transparency might help. On the state level, part of our private banks, if they're large banks, they don't have that local footprint interest anymore, because they've actually sold that level away.
In that sense, it's 2008 all over again, in which you chop up mortgages into various tranches and magically make the risk disappear amidst all the tranches. The people do have to buy that, and then that's one of the reasons that 2008 went systemic. It wasn't just limited to people who had bad mortgages because of that exact thing. I'll flag one other thing for you. There's a rating company called Demotech that should be as famous as Enron. Demotech provides all of the ratings for all of Florida's insurance companies, the remaining ones, the pop-up ones that still exist down there. And it's the rating that the insurance company gets that allows the mortgage they insure to go to Fannie and Freddie. Demotech has had a dozen A-rated insurance companies go bust, like boom, done. So it ain't a real rating agency, it sure doesn't seem. It's run out of a basement in Ohio by a husband and wife operation, and yet the entire real estate market of the state of Florida hangs on Fannie and Freddie, considering this seemingly incredible rating agency to be credible. So there are lots of loose threads in all of this, but that's another way that a lot of this local risk gets shoved onto national organizations, onto other taxpayers, and again, that makes it more systemic. Yeah.
I would say that the other thing that we're seeing is related to new construction. So in the state of North Carolina, for every one building that we buy out of the floodplain, we put 10 new residences into the floodplain. And so while they might be built to higher standards, they're still in risky places.
Yeah.
And I think that that then just pushes that risk off onto the national level. And so that's
Onto the NFID. Yeah.
Resilience and building.
Bryce, you had your hand up.
Just-
Excuse me, Representative Harrison.
Did you have something to say? I don't
No,
want to.
I was
Okay,
just saying Lars wanted to jump in
Okay.
after you.
Okay, all right, I just want to say, simplistically, something we've been pushing for 20 years is better disclosure in real estate transactions. We shouldn't be selling a house that was built on top of an inlet. We shouldn't be selling houses on steep slopes without letting the purchaser know. And we keep bumping into, business interest lobbies who fight that, but I think that's pretty simple solution, buying out also in the floodplain. But I would just say, gosh, I wish we could stop rolling back the protections we have at the state level. Matt, I appreciate you making that point about Duke Energy. The fact they're going to extend the life of 12 coal-fired power plants is absurd in this day and age. So I just want to get it back, our protections and our mitigations, and that's a whole nother conversation. But the easier one to get at, I think, is disclosure, and I wish we could make some progress on that.
We'll go to Lars to wrap it up.
So I'm a bit of a data nerd, and I've been accused of thinking of things as oversimplistic before. From my perspective, the two things that really drove this home for our community, and that I think are good anecdotes of the bigger problem, is the flood map is wrong.
Yeah.
We don't have an accurate picture.
Correct.
So how the hell are you as leaders supposed to make good decisions about this without an accurate picture of what this is? We need to totally reform how we're managing it. Flood maps, more money you get it done, it'll be worth every dollar invested to fix that data problem. And then two, once we fix the data problem, if the problem is that these homes are uninsurable because they're at such high risk, let's fix the risk of either, as mentioned before, buying it out or updating or fixing infrastructure to ensure that we, the health of the floodplain, have climate resiliency in the community. That would have saved our community quite a bit if we had modern infrastructure and modern warning, and the ability to actually prevent ourselves.
Yeah. Well, the good thing about FEMA flood maps is that everybody can see them. They're transparent. The bad news is that they're wrong, maybe even fraudulently wrong. So what has happened is that, thankfully, groups like First Street have stood up to do their own mapping. States sometimes do their own mapping. Rhode Island, we do our own mapping because we know we can't trust FEMA. But everybody in the country who does flood mapping has been approached by at least one bank or a private equity firm to say, we want to buy you, or we want to get access to your expertise because we're going to start placing bets in this space and we want better information than other people have. So there's actually a lot of genuine, real flood map risk data out there. It's just in the hand of the banks and the investors. It's not public like the FEMA stuff, which is the wrong stuff. So the way you find out that you're in a floodplain, according to a private bank's flood mapping group, is you get told they're done with you. You get told your insurance company has pulled on you. And you never see the map that's behind all of that. But it's interesting how the private sector is moving into this space big time to own the information and get an information advantage so they can place successful bets in what is a very dynamic and unhappy atmosphere. So somebody knew. Just wasn't you.
Well, let me thank everyone for being here today, and thank you all for coming. And my takeaway is we got a lot more to talk about. And so, I want to think about maybe what that looks like moving forward, getting a lot of the people around this table back together, whether it's in person or on Zoom, whatever is more easily achieved. But there's a lot of smart people in this room, and I think there's going to be a lot of smart solutions. I will turn it over to Senator Whitehouse and Representative Ross for offer any closing remarks they may have.
Mine are pretty simple. I just want to thank Congresswoman Ross. I mean, you and your office have been truly fabulous. I'm here because of you. I'm extremely grateful to you. I think, just so you see them, let me introduce Dan Dudas. Dan, right back there. Dan ran this whole operation when we did these maps through the Budget Committee, and he's now running the Democrat side of the Environment and Public Works Committee, and he and his team are available to you to answer questions, give you access to some of the data that's out there, kind of give you a little bit more empowerment as you pursue these various questions. And my Chief of Staff, Mona Lisa Duque, is right back there in the corner, who runs the Senate office for me. So if you haven't seen them before, that's why they came with me, but you should know who they are. And Congresswoman, bravo you, and thank you.
I just have a couple things to say. So some of you have been involved in roundtables that we've done before. We did one on resilience, on flooding, that Dr. Dello participated in, and the Partners for Environment and Justice. We've also done multiple roundtables with the realtors, and we've done work on climate change and the Inflation Reduction Act. And so some of you have been to our roundtables, and so once you're on the list, you're permanently on the list, and then you get invited to more things, and we can create that synergy that we need to be able to get good ideas, like we got a great idea here, and hopefully promote some positive change altogether. The only thing I wanted to ask people, I know at the end at like 11:30 we were going to take a photo, but is anybody leaving and not going on the site visit? Because if you are, maybe we do the photo now so that you get to be in the picture. Is everybody going on the site visit? Let's do it now. Let's do it now so that everybody's presence is captured. How's that? And look.
People in seats and then have other people.
Yeah.